In 1977, Brzezinski forms the Nationalities Working Group dedicated to the idea of weakening the Soviet Union by inflaming its ethnic tensions. The Islamic populations are regarded as prime targets. In December 1978, Brzezinski says, an arc of crisis stretches along the shores of the Indian Ocean, where fragile social and political structures in the region of vital importance to us threaten with fragmentation. The resulting political chaos could well be fueled by elements hostile to our values and sympathetic to our adversaries. State Department official Henry Pritch will later recall that Brzezinski had the idea that Islamic forces could be used against the Soviet Union. In February 1979, after the Shah is disposed of in Iran, the Ayatollah Khomeini takes over as its new leader. The U.S. is interested in continuing the work with the Iranian government. At first, the U.S. is taken aback by the new fundamentalist Islamic government, and Brzezinski contemplates fomenting a military coup. But Khomeini is fiercely anti-communist, and Brzezinski soon decides that Iran's new government can become a part of an effective anti-Soviet alliance he calls the Arc of Crisis. 9 months later, on November 4th, 1979, a group of Islamist students and militants took over the American embassy, where 53 Americans were held hostage for 444 days until January 20th, 1981, in support of the Iranian Revolution. In 1980, Brzezinski planned Operation Eagle Claw, what was meant to free the hostages in Iran using a newly created Delta Force. The mission was a failure and caused the deaths of 8 American servicemen. On December 8, 1979, a little over a month after the Iranian hostage crisis began, the Soviet Union invades Afghanistan. The Russians were initially invited by the Afghan government to deal with the rising instability and army mutinies, and they started crossing the border on December 8. But on December 26, Russian troops stormed the presidential palace, killed the country's leader, believing that he had secret contacts with the U.S. embassy and was probably a U.S. agent. Operation Cyclone was the code name for the United States Central Intelligence Agency's program to arm, train, and finance the Afghan Mujahideen during the Soviet War in Afghanistan from 1979 to 1989. Operation Cyclone was one of the longest and most expensive covert CIA operations ever undertaken. Funding began with $20 to $30 million per year in 1980 and rose to $630 million per year in 1987.
Mosques back again, because your cause is right and God is on your side.
After the 1989 Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, the United States attempted to buy back Raytheon's Stinger missiles. With a $55 million program to buy back around 300 missiles, the U.S. government collected most of the Stingers it had delivered, but some had found their way into Iran, Qatar, and North Korea. As for the insurgents and their leaders like Osama bin Laden, they became what we know today as AlQaeda and the Taliban. In a 180, in a January 1998 interview, Brzezinski admits that it was the U.S. policy to support radical Islamists to undermine Russia. He admits that the U.S. covert action drew Russia into starting the Afghan War in 1979. Asked if he has regrets about this, he responds, "Regret what? That secret operation was an excellent idea. It had the effect of drawing the Russians into the Afghan trap, and you want me to regret it?" The day that the Soviets officially crossed the border, I wrote to President Carter, "We now have the opportunity of giving the USSR its Vietnam War." Then he is asked if he regrets having given arms and advice to the future terrorists, and he responds, "What is most important to the history of the world, the Taliban or the collapse of the Soviet Empire? Some stirred up Muslims or the liberation of Central Europe and the end of the Cold War?" In the present, Zbigniew Brzezinski is the chairman for the RAND Corporation's Center for Middle Eastern Policy Advisory Board, counselor and trustee for the Center for Strategic and International Studies, as well as a counselor and trustee for the Center for a New American Security. He is also top advisor to Barack Obama. In conclusion, Brzezinski has used an indirect approach doctrine to commit his crimes and is guilty by his own admission or by the documentation contained of crimes against humanity, war crimes, conspiracy, breaching his oath of office, and the list goes on and on. Zbigniew Brzezinski worked his way into political power and influence through his family's legacy of nobility and wealth. His indirect doctrine has caused the deaths of an uncountable number of innocent people, and that number continues to grow today. He openly admits he has no remorse for these actions. His disregard for life in pursuit of power and his ideology has earned him a seat at the table of the bad guys.